Morning, Ben. How's things?
Excellent, thank you. Morning, Matt.
Very good. This is the first of 2026, so
Yes.
let's see what you've been looking at over the Christmas holidays and into January.
Yes, here we go. So I think what I've noticed about successful people, Matt, is that they often think of the opposite time of year. Like if it's winter, they're thinking about summer. So what I've been thinking about, partly because of what's been coming through the PM room, is what the pastures, the parasites are going to be doing on the pastures this coming year. We're always thinking about what the parasites are doing in the sheep with worms and resistance and whatnot. And I often don't think we think enough about what the parasites are going to be doing on the pastures. And a lot of us in parts of the world which were really dry and really hot last summer, we're still scarred by that thought. And that experience, and I've been thinking how best to turn that to our advantage. So if we think about how the parasites behave on the pastures, in some ways, if we go on to the next slide, this slide explains what the definition is of clean, dirty and medium pasture based on how recently sheep were on the pastures. So people can stop this and read this slide, and the upshot of this is that sheep have to be off the pastures for longer than you ever think to be defined as clean. So it's worth trying at this stage, before the ewes and lambs turn out, or before they go onto the pastures they're going to be growing on, colour in the map of the farm, which fields are, according to this definition, red, which fields are yellow and which fields are green. So draw that map to start with and think how best you can use those less contaminated pastures for growing fat lambs and getting them finished and preserve them if at all possible.
And if we can avoid the worms,
yes,
then we'll always get better results than accepting that high challenge and trying to treat our way out of it.
Yes, so because of the constant reinfection, avoiding is always better than worming. The next slide shows that hot, dry summer, what you could construe as a pasture decontamination event, as in during those dry, hot months, the worms, such as they were if they were hatching out, they were getting baked and killed, except the ones in the middle of the fecal balls. If there were fecal balls by the end of that hot, dry event, they would maybe still be quite happy. So when it rained, if there were any fecal balls still there, then they would be blown apart, and those larvae still in those fecal balls would then rise up and hatch out. Or if those fecal balls could in some way be broken up or exposed or flattened or whatever, perhaps as the next slide shows, by things like dung beetles. I don't mean that dung beetles are the answer. I just mean that what dung beetles do is they open up those balls and spread them out. If you can do that somehow and expose those worms to that drying hot sun, you will kill them. And then you will have what effectively are pretty clean pastures when the grass grows and it rains. If there's any scope for planning and thinking how best to use those clean pastures once the grass grows, then that should be what we do.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely.
And the next point I wanted to make on the sheep subject was that as sheep, ewes and hogs have been running through for scanning, I have noticed that's when you find OPA. Winter is where OPA and things like that pick out. It picks out the poorer ones, and this is when they fall off the end of the earth and they're thin or they die. And now's a chance to have a look at your OPA, MV, fluke status and all that. I know a bloke who's been looking for fluke, looking at every sheep that dies for fluke, and has turned up an OPA problem, which he's going to need to deal with. But it's better that he's found it than that he hasn't. And following on from our previous point, what I have seen, because in some cases the worm challenge through the main part of the summer wasn't that great, there are some hogs and some shearlings and some lower parity animals whose immunity was therefore not topped up, and now they're getting found out in a reasonably mild winter. They're getting challenged with worms, as you can see in this picture on the bottom left here. They're getting challenged with worms, and in some cases they're losing ground and they're thin at scanning.
Sometimes it's just because they've got thin.
Yep.
If they've already got thin and they've picked up some worms, then those worms will take advantage. And so,
the door's half open. Yeah.
Anything that's looking a bit poor, it's worth doing that worm egg count and treating the ones that need it.
But where they are housed, I would just make two observations about pneumonia. Often what started the pneumonia has happened quite a bit before, perhaps a couple of weeks, perhaps a month beforehand. Sometimes when cattle come in, they can go from quite sparse pasture, because you're wanting to keep them outside as long as you can, here on the left, and then this arrow onto really good pasture. And sometimes what can happen is they can get fog fever inside, what's effectively fog fever inside, where the rumens just produce this toxin which affects their lungs. And so that's worth finding out that that's what's going on, because next year it's worth exposing the calves when they're outside to the forage that they're going to be fed on when they're inside, just to smooth that transition. And so the change in diet is not too dramatic. Again, cattle will get a challenge in their airways, which compromises their ability to get rid of the bacteria that they're inhaling, and that's obviously worse when they're housed, because sometimes the ventilation is worse. And the airway damage might not kill them at the time, but it might make them in a month's time more likely to get bacterial pneumonia. And one of the things that can cause that airway damage, I think, is lungworm challenge when they were out at pasture. It might be worth blood sampling those calves to see what challenge of lungworm they had when they were outside, and if those antibodies are positive, then you can use that information to alter your lungworm management strategy, not so much for when the calves are outside, although that is important too, but for when they come in, to make sure that their lungs aren't partially damaged so that they're more prone to getting bacterial pneumonia.
So checking a few blood samples will let you know, and then you can either do something about it now and adapt your plans for next year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, that's right. And the last thing to say about cattle is that it has now been for a while pretty wet, and there will be some mouldy bales about. Mouldy bales have all sorts of things in them that you don't want. They can cause abortion, like in this next picture here, with a placentitis in cattle. They can cause listeria, and they can have all sorts of mycotoxins, which are difficult to get to the bottom of, but you know, they can cause some serious damage under some circumstances.
So if it's a properly mouldy bale, bypass the cow and put it straight in the midden.
And that's really what wants to happen if you possibly can. So the summary is: use your brain to focus on the product, which is cattle and sheep on a hook. Plan for next year, learn what you can now, use the harshness of the winter to let it find out those sheep that aren't performing, the ones with OPA, the ones with worms, all that. And now is January. Think fast forward to next July and what's going to be happening to those pastures and what the worms are going to be doing on those pastures. And if it's hot and dry like it was last year, then see if you can break up in some way those fecal pats and use what clean pasture that's going to follow on for getting lambs off the farm as soon as possible, I would say.
Yeah, it's the same as ever. If we can take a little bit of time before the madness of lambing and calving hits to plan ahead.
Yes.
And we know the plan will have to change, but at least if we've got a plan to start with, we've got something to work on.
Yes. And this is if there ever is a moment of tranquility and reflection, after Christmas, but before, you know, chaos, maybe this is it.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Ben. That's an excellent food for thought, and look forward to seeing you next month.
Super. Look forward to it.
Thank you very much.